Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. A lot happening today. In just over 13 hours' time, Donald Trump will be sentenced for his 34 felony convictions in New York. That is after the Supreme Court within the last hour or so denied his request for a delay. Now, barely. The 5-4 decision just came down the last hour. Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett siding with the three liberals on the court, deciding that first, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course of appeal. That is usually how this works. Second, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect's responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Alito, who just talked to Donald Trump on the phone yesterday, say they would have granted the stay. Go figure. But with the 5-4 decision, Donald Trump will be the first convicted felon to become president of the United States. We're just breaking barriers right and left these days. And he will have to appear virtually in a New York courtroom at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning for his sentencing. Lisa Rubin is an MSNBC legal correspondent. Christy Greenberg served as an assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York, where she was deputy chief of the criminal division there. They both join me now. First of all, let me just start with you on the law here. You and I talked, and I'll just cop to it. I thought there was no way in heck this was going to happen. He was going to pull some rabbit out of a hat. I may have even said the words, "I'll bet $10,000 it never happens." I was wrong. He exhausted his appeals in New York court, right? So that Merchan ordered, then there's one intermediate appellate level. They said no. Then there's the ultimate appellate level. They said no. Then emergency filing the Supreme Court being like, guys, help me out. You've been there for me all along. Help me out. What was the argument his lawyers were making in the Supreme Court?
His lawyers were making sort of two arguments, Chris. One is that at the trial, there was evidence introduced at the trial on which the jury relied, for which he was entitled to immunity. So his argument goes under the Supreme Court's immunity ruling.
Right. Per John Roberts' SCOTUS opinion last year.
Correct. That not only does the president have immunity from prosecution for his official acts or his core constitutional duties, at least, but he also has immunity from even having official acts evidence introduced in trials having purely to do with his private conduct. That was his first argument. His second argument was, I am a president-elect, and the same constitutional concerns that the Department of Justice recognizes with respect to sitting presidents and prosecuting them for any reason whatsoever, those should apply to me too, because I am very busy with very important things under the Presidential Transition Act, and you should therefore stretch your July ruling to cover this period too.
I might run for president someday. I think I get immunity, personally. That's my
the DA's
that's my new constitutional interpretation. Let's just keep going with this. You were surprised. You walked in, you're surprised.
Oh, yeah, I got this wrong. I really thought that they were going to bail him out once again, because that's what we've seen. And, you know, some cynicism was warranted. This was 5-4. There were 4 of these justices who were prepared to help him out here. I didn't count on the fact that Justices Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett would do the right thing here. But even then, the order itself is interesting. They say that the reason they're okay with this is because the trial court's stated intent is to impose this sentence of unconditional discharge, which means nothing. No jail, no probation, no conditions, nothing, nada.
Wait, just stop on there right there, because that is a tip to that argument, right? So they're saying, like, the equities that you're bringing forth, which is I am president-elect and I do have many busy things to do, down meetings and calls down in Mar-a-Lago. They're saying, we hear you, but it's not going to be that bad a burden. But it's conceding that there's something there.
It is conceding, yes. And they're saying, and this sentencing is going to be a brief virtual hearing. Those are not typically words that are associated with sentencing of criminal defendants. Sentencings are not brief.
We'll get you in, we'll get you out.
Right. That's not how it works. For any other criminal defendant, you're usually looking at least an hour for a criminal sentencing, even in a pretty minor case. And they're not virtual for any other criminal defendant. They're always in person. So, yes, should we take the win, the fact that the sentencing is happening at all? Yeah, but this is not business as usual. This is not how it works for anybody else. Essentially, the American presidency is officially a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's what this is.
I have to say that I had gotten so cynical about this court that I thought, well, they'll find a way. And I thought they were going to issue some temporary order. We'll consider it. But of course, again, the shadow docket here and the emergency docket is so complicated procedurally that I was like, oh, do they need 3 votes or 4? Like, no, it's going to be actually found 5-4, whatever. Point being, though, to your point, it does also feel like there are 4 votes for whatever. Like, on the record, first time, right? This is the first Supreme Court ruling of the new Trump era. This is the first, the last time he had a 5-4 court in his favor with Kennedy as a swing voter. He now has a 6-3 vote in his favor with, Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett as the likely defectors to make a majority of the liberals. And this really feels like our first look at this court where there's 4 votes for, do whatever you want to do.
It's a pretty dire...
I mean, do you feel that way? Or is that, am I being
I'm a Pollyanna, and so I will always see the upside of this. The upside to me is that they tried to stretch the meaning of the July presidential immunity decision far beyond that which John Roberts, who was its author, intended for it to go. And therefore, I think it backfired on them. So in that respect, I was gratified to see that.
We have some breaking legal news.
Yes.
Do you know this?
Yes, the 11th Circuit.
Okay, so the 11th Circuit, which is the circuit that was reviewing an application by Donald Trump to stop the report from Jack Smith's office from coming out, has denied the request by Trump's co-defendants to block the release of special counsel Jack Smith's report, but left in place the 3-day delay that Judge Aileen Cannon instituted to allow for further appeals. So at the circuit court level on the Dox case, they're saying you don't get to stop Jack Smith from releasing this. We're going to leave in place this 3-day delay that Cannon put in that no one could find.
They're saying it's sort of procedurally, look, if you wanted to appeal her order, you should have appealed it directly, and therefore that 3-day period is going to stay in place sort of as a default. But it also gives Trump time, obviously, to now run to the Supreme Court because there's going to be a 3-day wait.
That's amazing. So there's going to be a SCOTUS writ petition, and they're going to get another, already, he's not even in office yet. And there's going to be another swing here.
This one, I mean, again, Judge Cannon's order was so absurd. I mean, first, the case wasn't even before her. She had already dismissed it. And she issues this order to say the whole report can't be released, even the January 6th part, which wasn't even before her. So, again, this one, I feel fairly confident, at least with respect to the January 6th report, which Merrick Garland has said they intend to release, that will be released and that the Supreme Court won't block it.
We should also make the point here that I'm not sure in terms of the Dox case, we all read the indictment. It's not like we're going to learn something shockingly new in this report, most likely. It seems more to me about I know you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
I
think both
I'm wrong.
shaking our
Please.
head.
Okay.
So one of the things that Jack Smith said is that he had unclassified evidence that he intended to prove at trial that would say why Donald Trump had these classified documents in the first place, what he intended to do with them. That, to me, has always been the $64,000 question. Was he just holding them as trophies, or did he intend to sell them? What was he doing? Why was it so important for him to keep these? And the fact, if we could get answers to those questions from Jack Smith in this report, that would have real value there. So there's a reason, I would think, why Donald Trump's team is trying so hard to keep this from being released. And unfortunately, Merrick Garland has agreed, with respect to the classified documents case, that we're not going to see it. They don't intend to release it because there are these 2 co-defendants where they're still pursuing an appeal. But honestly, Donald Trump's DOJ is going to dismiss the charges against them anyway. So if you're weighing the public interest here, go ahead and drop the case against them and let us see the classified documents report.
I would say I want to see the classified documents report for a slightly different reason. There's a cast of characters here who witnessed the behavior or participated in it with him. And many of those people are scheduled to take important roles in the next Trump administration.
Handling classified information.
Including Susie Wiles, who is PAC representative in the indictment, including Kash Patel, who at one point in time was the designated liaison between the former Trump administration and the National Archives. So for those kinds of reasons, I would be really interested in seeing it because think about how much we learned from the Mueller report with respect to all of the witnesses and the documentation and the back and forth between people. That's what I really want to see here, even if we never get classified information.
All right, that's a really good point. So let's go back to, sorry, I'm keeping a lot of balls in the air today. Let's go back to the sentencing. So just walk me through what happens tomorrow at 9:30.
Tomorrow at 9:30, when we walk in, we will see a screen, in all likelihood, where Todd Blanche is with his client, Donald Trump, at Mar-a-Lago.
Maybe they choose a cool Zoom background.
Maybe.
The American flag.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani was instructed by a judge the other day to get rid of his American flag background, which is the joke Christie is making. But I think what we'll hear from first is we'll hear from the prosecution. Then the defense will have an opportunity to speak. And then he will give Trump himself an opportunity to speak. And what's crazy about that is, Chris, I've been at 2 trials already where Donald Trump has had an opportunity to speak. One as a witness, the other he wanted to make a statement. In both cases, he ended up getting into skirmishes with those judges about talking too long and about things that he had already been precluded from talking about. What happens when he's virtual? What does Judge Merchan do? Like, just cut the feed? That's sort of an open question about how this all unfolds tomorrow. But ultimately, and I think this is the part that Christie knows best, and the lengthiest part, is he will deliver a recitation of his reasons for imposing the sentence that he says he's going to impose, and at the end, sentence him officially to this unconditional discharge, as we're all expecting.
Yeah, and we've gotten a preview already of some of what Judge Merchan will say. In his opinion, he says that this crime from Donald Trump, these 34 felonies, represents the premeditated and continuous deception by the leader of the free world. Like, those are pretty strong statement about how he views the gravity of this offense. And, you know, again, that's not normally something you would think is going to be met with no consequences whatsoever in terms of punishment. Just remember, again, to be kind of the Debbie Downer here, yes, it's good we're having a sentencing, but in a way, like, this is not the sentencing that he should be getting. He should be getting punished. Michael Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in prison for making this payment at the direction and for the benefit of Donald Trump. And he's somebody who pled guilty. Donald Trump went to trial. Michael Cohen accepted responsibility. Donald Trump has been in contempt of the gag order several times. So, like, this is something that you would expect if he were not going to be president in 17 days, he would have gone to jail for. So I expect also Donald Trump, if it's not Donald Trump, certainly his lawyers are going to go after Judge Merchan. Their filings have been replete with statements about how he is acting unlawfully, how he is acting unconstitutionally. You don't normally see that. You can say to the judge, you got it wrong and we're going to appeal, but you don't usually hear, hey, you're breaking the law. So I think you're going to see
over
fireworks.
Zoom.
100%.